Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We are doing an unboxing today of this game, Battle for Germany. This is by Decision Games, and this is a brand new 2020 edition of the SPI Classic. Original design, as we can see, by Jim Dunnigan. New edition developed by Don Johnson. So let's open her up and see what we get. Standard. I don't want to say standard because Decision is one of the companies that varies from this, but a wargame industry standard 2-inch box here. And I should have just used the knife. Let's just use the knife. It's easier and there's less chance of wrecking things. Okay, so Battle for Germany. So we have first one 6-sided die and a baggie containing one baggie. That is an interesting packing decision. Now, this is not an enormous game, so it's probably not as weird as that makes it sound, but all right, so let's see what our components look like. We have a rule book. Okay, so this is what feels like 16 pages. It is, in fact, 16 pages. It's almost like I'm getting good at this. On fairly thick paper. With some historical background in here too, which is nice. I'm sure it's out of S&T, but that's fine. They have always been, Decision has always been generally good with their boxed games about including something dealing with the historical background in detail. So actual rules on this sucker run to 8 pages. It is quite a simple game. Now, for those concerned, and I share that concern, with the question of how similar is this to the SPI Classic. My understanding, without delving into it in complete depth, my understanding is it is the same game with a few modifications made to the map to expand the map area, and we'll see that in a minute, and maybe some extra counters. We have basically, though, the same game. We have the player aid card with a CRT and a terrain effects chart without the graphical depiction of the terrain, but the terrain on here should be simple enough that that's not much of a big deal. And here is a 1975 setup chart. So this is the setup for the original game. Actually, let's take a look at that because, and there's a way to play this with 3 or 4 players. There are 3 and 4 player variants included. And there is a red star, white star Patton's fantasy scenario, which of course would mean the Western Allies versus the Soviets. And an expanded historical scenario and a historical scenario. Okay, so there's like a bunch of different ways to play this, which is cool. The Courland area, which I'll show you that when we look at the map. I believe that is the extra map area. All right, counters. Ooh, okay. So something new here. This is the counter sheet. It's one counter sheet. This is a brown core stock that is noticeably thicker than the stock that we have seen from Decision Games in the last few years. I personally have, having handled quite a lot of Gauss counters, I personally have not had an issue with the thinness of their counters, but I know some people have expressed that, and this should make those folks happy. It's definitely thicker, harder stock, and I actually had some issues where some of these guys almost accidentally came out. So we have here the Soviets in brown. We have 2 colors of Germans, the lighter colored Germans and the darker colored Germans. These are presumably Free French. These are, looks like Yugoslavs. That does look like that's correct. Here's the USA. Here's Bulgaria. Here's some Polish units. And here's some more American units and some Romanians and some Polish communists. And some supply markers, which look like they flip. No, those are only Soviet supply markers. And these look like Soviet fronts. Okay. Even though the rest of them appear to be armies. Okay. That's not crazy at this scale. So let's look at this scale and see what that turns into. We have a mounted map. I was concerned. I bought the first thing that Decision had done with a mounted map, which was their reprint. It was in a bundle with some other stuff. in that same year. I think this was 2 or 3 years ago at Origins that I picked up the current edition of D-Day at Omaha Beach, and I was like a little concerned because I've seen mounted maps go wrong, right? And I was pleased to note at the end of the day that the mounted map for that is of very nice quality, and I was completely pleased with it. Okay, so this is not going to sit flat at this exact moment. That is a super common issue with mounted maps. You'll just have to like sit on it till it flattens out, or put plexi over it, which defeats the purpose of having a mounted map. So the orientation here is a little interesting. So I'm looking at the map, straight on, but up is east and down is west, which makes sense, again, given the game, right? So the way this works, for those who don't know, it's a really interesting, another genius Jim Dunnigan design, where it's a the original at least. There are variants in this current edition to do it differently, but the basic idea is that it is a two-player game. One player plays the Western Allies and the Germans facing the Soviets, and then the other player plays the Soviets and the Germans facing the Western Allies. And in that way, one player doesn't have to feel like a sucker for having to play the side that historically lost, and which is really deterministically fated to lose the total conflict, regardless of what victory points show at the end, right? So, but again, we have variants to do this differently, 3 and 4 player versions of this. I assume a 3-player game would be Western Allies, Germans, and Soviets, and 4 players would be everybody takes their own side, which is all fine, but it does undermine the simplistic beauty of the original Jim Dunnigan genius design. Fairly handsome map. Who is responsible for the map art? That could be in the credits in the rule book, so let's look at that. Map graphics by Joe Youst. I really like Joe's map work personally, and I think this is fairly handsome too. It's a very traditional wargame map. I mean, there's nothing like remarkably innovative about it, but I like that style, so I have no particular issue with that. We also have, this is interesting actually, we have a 1994 setup chart in the rulebook. Presumably, this is the setup chart from the previous Decision Games edition. Decision has redone this game before. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit in the SPI catalog because it's a small game. It's a well-remembered favorite. It's really kind of a brilliant design. So and I'm glad to see that, for better or worse, I have participated in this discussion elsewhere about Decision's practices when it comes to redoing SPI Classics. Sometimes that does not pan out the way I would have preferred to see it, and this is one case in which it looks like it has. It looks like the original game with some mild enhancements, but you can still play it as the original game if you want on these relatively fancy. These look like 9/16" counters to me. They might be 5/8 actually. I'm going to say they're 9/16. Bigger counters, nice thick counters, mounted map. It's very fancy. So this has been a quick look at Battle for Germany New Edition. This is a new edition, just came out relatively recently from Decision. Looks nice. This is a buddy unboxing, by the way, so there'll be thanks to him in the card that's showing right about now. So I want to thank you for watching. I would like to encourage you to help support Ardwulf's Lair by either sharing the videos around on social media platform of your choice, or you can go to the Patreon link that's in the video description. I'd appreciate that as well. In the meantime, subscribe, like, and comment, and all that jazz. So thanks again for watching. I will see you next time. Happy wargaming.